Hey everyone, thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar, What Today's IT Leaders Must Know for Modern Endpoint Management. We're going to give everyone a minute to get in, get settled, and get ready before we get started. So hop in, chat, say hi, tell us where you're calling in from, and we'll give everyone just a minute to get ready before we jump into the slides.
Yes, sounds good. Okay, perfect.
I think we're starting to see numbers slow down a little bit, so I think we can get started. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us for today's webinar, What Today's IT Leaders Must Know for Modern Endpoint Management. This session will outline what has changed in the endpoint landscape and why legacy management approaches no longer meet enterprise requirements. We will define what modern endpoint management means in practical operational terms, not just as a technology shift, but as a transformation in how IT delivers services and security. This webinar is based on our Endpoint Management Buyer's Guide for Enterprise IT, which provides a structured framework for evaluating modern endpoint management platforms. If you're not familiar with the guide, you can find it in the resource section and you can go ahead and take a look. We're hoping that you'll gain a framework for evaluating endpoint management platforms based on automation, visibility, security posture, scalability, and more. And we'll discuss how leading enterprises are consolidating tools, reducing manual processes, and aligning endpoint strategy to broader business outcomes. Ultimately, the goal here is to equip IT leaders like you with clear criteria and strategic considerations to inform modernization initiatives in 2026 and beyond. All that said, we do hope this can be an interactive session. There is a chat, there is a Q&A section. If you have questions and you want to engage with us during the webinar, engage with your peers in chat, drop your questions in Q&A. We should have time at the end to answer some of those questions if you have any. Beyond that, this webinar will be recorded and we will send that recording out usually within 24, 48 hours if you want to go back and review anything we said, or if you want to share it with any of your colleagues and peers. With that, I think we can go ahead and jump in and introduce ourselves a little bit. First, Tom Molden, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Molden. I lead executive engagement here at NinjaOne. Been in the software world for a handful of years, and before that, I spent 30 years as a practitioner in IT and security. I've been in some pretty large global enterprises, and over the course of my career, dealt with a lot of pretty significant transformations and run some pretty big IT initiatives. And so I hope to bring a little bit of a been there, done there perspective to what we're talking about here.
Tom has had the benefit of evaluating a lot of different endpoint management in his lifetime, so he's particularly relevant for this conversation. My name's Pete Breton. I run product strategy here at NinjaOne, which really means I'm leading the strategic direction for the platform's roadmap and innovation initiatives. And really, I get to spend a lot of my time talking with IT leaders like you to understand the challenges that you're facing, the problems you're trying to overcome, and the initiatives that you really care about, and bring that insight back to our own product teams, our go-to-market teams, et cetera. And so, I've spent a lot of my time working with leaders like you to evaluate, specifically in the context of Ninja, how endpoint management will add value to their environment and what they really need to think about to bring endpoint management or more modern endpoint management into their environments. I think we can jump into the agenda next here. We have really 5 sections here. This is only a half an hour webinar, so we don't have a ton of slides here, but we'll walk through the following 5 areas. The first is, really what does modernization look like in 2026, and what really is modern endpoint management? What do we mean when we say that? I'll dig into buying considerations and how you really maximize the value of your tech stack. And then at the end, we'll talk about a free tech stack assessment that Tom is offering to our partners and customers, and talk about a giveaway for that. So with that, Tom, I think we can actually jump into the meat of the content here if you want to kick it off.
Yeah, happy to. So when I think about modernization and why modernization is such a priority this year, it's not a new term. People have been, using the term for many years, but I feel like we're kind of at an inflection point in technology history in business. And for years, the technology landscape has been becoming more and more complex, and there's no sign that that's going to slow down. You can see here, some of the examples on this slide. regulatory pressure around the world is becoming more and more of an issue, and then geopolitical shifts that we're experiencing right now is sort of doubling down on that pressure. And so, the pace of innovation that's happening in enterprises and in businesses, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it is so fast, right? And the reason that IT has to modernize is just to keep pace with the innovation that's happening in the business, right? You have a long history of, let's say, underinvestment in IT infrastructures and operations in a lot of enterprises, and as the business continues to evolve from an innovation perspective, IT needs to keep up. So that's really the case for why we need to be talking about modernization. You can skip forward one, Pete. So in addition to this notion of keeping up with the pace of innovation in a business, there's also like all this cost associated with the legacy world that we live in most cases, right? And so I'll give a couple of examples here. Obviously, most everyone I'm going to say has dealt with sort of the problem of fragmented tools, right? Tools in most enterprises kind of grew up in sort of functional areas, right? You've got tools for security, tools for IT, you've got tools for the Windows team, tools for the Linux team, tools for mobility teams, et cetera, right? And so the cost of managing and owning all these tools is just getting larger and larger, right? You need different skill sets, you need different organizational structures, right? All these types of things. And so there's a huge cost to maintaining just the status quo of legacy tooling, right? And then, of course, the next one around manual processes, right? So if you take patching as an example, I talked to a lot of large global enterprises. I was on the phone last night with a very large global manufacturer that's trying to figure out how to become more efficient at patching, across multiple sites in multiple geos and languages and different, political scenarios even. And there's so much manual work that goes on today using legacy processes and systems that it's almost impossible to keep it up. On the visibility side, right? So uh, it used to be, at least in my experience, that close to exhaustive was good enough. Meaning, hey, we got pretty good visibility to everything here. We feel pretty good about it, right? Now, the pressure that teams are under from boards and from shareholders, et cetera, and regulatory bodies to be like completely exhaustive in knowing about everything that you have, and that it's protected is growing and growing. So having everything in one place is becoming more important. And then, of course, finally, the misalignment with business goals. This goes back to the keeping pace with innovation in the business, right? If you can't keep up, then you're becoming less and less relevant, right? And so, why do I need IT? I'm getting all sorts of innovation from all sorts of other sources, right? So staying in touch with where the business is headed is critical, right? And there's a cost to this.
One thing I'd
We
add to
can
that,
skip.
Tom, is
Yeah, go ahead.
if you look at the previous this slide and the previous slide, if you are not approaching modern endpoint management, if you're stuck in this legacy environment, that's how IT teams become solidified as a cost center. We always hear about the risk of IT being seen as a cost center, right? It is just somewhere that we need to look at cutting costs, right? They're not a strategic enabler. They are not driving the business forward. If you are not actively pursuing modern endpoint management, if you are burdened by these legacy costs, it will and can cement you as a cost center rather than a strategic enabler, and that's bad for everyone in the team, and particularly for IT leaders who then have to take on the burden of that.
Yep, exactly. So if we just look at like what does a modern endpoint management look like? It's in quotes here, right? Because it probably means different things to different people. But so our perspective is, you have a legacy environment that has, lots of on-prem infrastructure. It's got silos all over the place. Really, in an operations world, really quite reactive to risks that are being pointed out to you, to needs that are being pointed out to you from a business performance perspective, and so forth, right? And then if you can be in more of a unified platform world, right? This is really at the core of what modern endpoint management is all about, where everyone's working off the same set of data. There's no ambiguity about what is and what isn't. You've got significant benefits from automation that's policy driven, where you really can take the people out of it and the manual work out of it, right? And then you've got this collaboration effect between IT and security that not only drives efficiencies, but it also increases accountability and just gives the entire, let's call it regulatory world, a greater peace of mind, right? So this unified IT operations platform sits in the middle of what we're calling modern endpoint management. And if you look to the right here, what does it mean, right? It means you've got to really be in a cloud native environment, right? You need continuous compliance, right? You need to be remediating in a cyclical process, not in a reactive fashion to threats that are being pointed out to you, right? And you need to be able to scale, right? And so my perspective on this, and I've been around for long enough to have seen sort of the evolution of these types of IT management platforms. Like, if you're not in a cloud native environment and you're not able to perform this type of policy driven automation, then you really are not able to keep up with the pace that businesses are evolving here. So to me, it's almost a mandatory. You've got to be looking at these types of modern IT solutions. And at the end of the day, what you really want is IT to become a critical enabler, to be a critical enabler for business growth, right? That's what everyone cares about, right? We're growing and we're making profits, right? Think about IT and technology from the perspective of a CFO, right? Business agility, all these types of faster risk mitigation, all things you see listed on the slide here, right? You'll notice we're not using the word AI on this slide anywhere, right? AI is the driver of the pace of business innovation and growth that we're seeing in the world today, right? And you've got to be in this more modern approach to managing your IT in order to leverage that and keep up with it. We can skip one forward here. So in terms of what IT management really means, or modern IT management really means, right? If you think about the next generation of businesses and industries, right, that are kind of evolving in front of our eyes, there's a lot of disruption. There's new entrants to traditional industries. There's industries that are changing. The global dynamic is changing in terms of like where the power bases of industries are, et cetera, right? And in this IA world, I'm going to come back to keeping pace with the speed of innovation that's happening in the business. If IT can do this, right, and if we can really streamline and modernize the management of our estates, then we become in a position to actually take the reins of business growth, right? I've talked about it in the sense that IT has an opportunity to kind of own the keys to the car when it comes to AI, right? Rather than sit back and react to the pace of innovation that's being driven, it's like let's take the keys and let's drive the car, right? And let's use the power that we can create from a more modern management of our IT to drive the kind of outcomes that you're seeing here, right? Much more proactive, right? Highly automated, right? And scalable, right? Nothing can scale like a cloud based platform, right? And so that's where I think most business leaders want to go. And I think we as IT leaders have the opportunity to kind of be in the driver's seat with them. I think we got one more here for me. So let's just say you're working in an IT department, an enterprise somewhere, right? And you believe all this and you want to make the case for it, right? Like I want to make the case for investment here. I can tell you from my own experience, I've probably been through 30 or more IT budget cycles in my career, and the amount of best intentions, that have been put forward and then ultimately deprioritized in terms of investing in infrastructure and operations and things like this, right, has resulted in kind of my view is, quite a lot of tech debt and legacy that's sitting out there in places where people would prefer not to have it, right? And so these are some arguments that you can make, right? So obviously reducing costs through consolidation, right? Getting rid of the myriad of different tools that you use in different environments and replacing with a unified platform is going to save you, hard dollars. That should get anyone's attention that's looking at it. And then, scaling without infrastructure drag, right? This is another important factor when you think about cloud nativity, right? And where sort of the future technology is you don't need all the infrastructure investment to scale with cloud, right? You can scale so much faster, and making an investment in cloud-based platforms, in spite of some of the resistance that might exist out there still, right? There's a lot of people that live in sort of the world of fear of like, well, wait a minute, it's not in my control or things like this. To me, it's almost like a mandate. And it's something when I talk to CFOs, that they absolutely resonates with them. Yeah, we're willing to, we have the appetite to go invest more in cloud. And then, of course, the security side of things, I already talked about this. I've sat in enough board meetings and prepared enough board materials in my career to where, I have a feeling and an understanding for the level of trust and that boards have in IT and security teams, right? The more we're able to sort of work together and sort of converge the paths that we're on, the more we're creating peace of mind for companies, right? And the less time and effort and stress we have to invest in making sure that we're protected, quote unquote, right? And so, and then, lastly, maybe this is the most important thing of all. If you as an IT leader have the ability to make the case that you can actually positively impact business outcomes, right, through increased agility, for example, manufacturing uptime, right? I use this example frequently. If you have the ability to um, make a small dent in the amount of planned and unplanned downtime in manufacturing environments, you're creating a direct increase in manufacturing output, right? And you could do that through, patch automation is a classic example for that, right? Taking some of the cycles out of that and maintenance and things like this. Then you all of a sudden have the attention of business leaders, right, across the enterprise. And so to me, that's really the most important lever that you've got here is say, hey, where can I go increase business performance with a more modern platform to manage my IT? And that to me is really kind of the hallmark of the next generation of IT.
I think it's over to me. So, thanks so much, Tom, for walking through that. And for those of you who are interested in moving towards a more modern approach to IT operations and endpoint management, a big part of Tom's role here is helping our partners and customers make that case internally for endpoint management. So, if you're interested, always reach out to Tom. He's happy to hop on it and help make that case with you for a more modern approach to IT ops and endpoint management. So, as part of our endpoint management buyer's guide, we put together, sort of a checklist and set of criteria on how to evaluate modern endpoint management. And we went out and talked to, again, a lot of IT leaders. We talked to our own internal subject matter experts on the topic. And we jumped into really 6 considerations when you're evaluating IT operations platforms. The ultimate goal here is to approach IT ops from a platform perspective, because a platform is really that one operating layer for IT that gives you a unified data model, a policy engine, automation, and integrated workflows, so that outcomes are repeatable, not heroic, right? It's always great when an IT person goes, or anyone in any function goes out of their way to deliver a heroic outcome. But ultimately, IT as that technology enabler in businesses needs repeatability, and you need a platform that will help you do that. And so platformization is one critical plug-in to a more modern approach to IT ops and endpoint management. Modernization is about building that right operational foundation and the ability to consistently deliver outcomes at scale. The trap here is that often we are evaluating pain and finding point solutions to solve that pain. And it's completely rational, right? Like, I have this pain today. I'm going to go find a technology solution to solve it. And that happens over year, quarter over quarter, decade over decade, until you have an environment that has inbuilt complexity and a ton of legacy debt. And that leads to sprawl. It leads to negative business outcomes like inefficiency and lower business agility. And we need to pivot our viewpoint from that to a more winning approach, which is to evaluate what we can put in place that can carry the IT operating model forward for the next 3 to 5 years. And that's often a consolidated platform-based approach. If you don't take this approach, you're going to end up with inefficiency, inconsistent policies, worse SLA performance, maybe security risk and audit exposure. So when we think about the considerations when evaluating platforms, there's really six here I want to go through, and we'll start really at that operational foundation, right? And the most important question, and not to blow any minds here, but do the capabilities of the platform meet my technical needs, right? I would love to sell NinjaOne to everyone, right? But ultimately, it needs to fit your needs. If a platform can solve your needs from a technical evaluation perspective, that's step one. You need to prove that it does that before any of the rest are relevant. And that's sort of an of course moment, but it's worth stating that shouldn't buy platforms just to buy platforms. No one wakes up every day and says, I want to buy a platform today. I hope. I hope not. Maybe there's one person in the world. The second one is, does this platform reduce our reliance on on-prem and legacy technology so that we can scale? The more we rely on on-prem technology and legacy technology, the more we are going to be locked into that IT cost center viewpoint. We have to have people working late nights. We have to have people taking servers offline to patch them. We have to have people who go in and make sure our endpoint management server is up and available so that we can support global operations. All of that is additional debt in your IT organization that you need to solve for. Cloud-based solutions take that away and really move you away from these legacy technologies, most of which really weren't built for a modern way of work. It's not so much that they weren't built, that they don't have the technical underpinnings that allow you to achieve endpoint management. It's that they were not built with modern work in mind. Things like hybrid and remote work, things like globally distributed organizations, things like an under or lack of reliance on the network as a boundary. Those are real things that were really prevalent early on, and now you have a different work model. The third here is, does the platform help us unify visibility across all endpoints, operating systems, and IT workflows? I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an organization and seen that they have, a tool for Windows servers, a tool for Linux, a tool for Windows end user compute. Maybe that's the same as their Mac management capability, or maybe they have a separate one for Mac. Maybe they also have a third-party patching solution in place. Every time you add an additional tool, yes, it's to solve a problem, but it inherently adds complexity, risk, and cost. And so one of the things that you absolutely should be evaluating is, how do I get all of my device management and device information in one place? That means you don't have to focus on dedicated specialists for each tool or for each type of operating system. It means you have a single source of data for audit and compliance and reporting and lifecycle management and budgeting. It means you have better visibility for better decision making. The outcome of true unification of all of your devices in one place is really hard to understand. The fourth here is, how does this platform help reduce risk and improve compliance, right? There are a couple pieces here. The unified data model is one of them, but a big one here is like patching, for example. If I have to look at 5 different tools to understand my patching, endpoint hardening, and compliance stance, I don't have real visibility because I have to make assumptions about how those data models work across different tools and ultimately roll them up manually to report off as and where needed. And so reducing risk, platformization inherently reduces risk because you have a lower attack surface because you have one tool instead of many, but it also helps reduce risk through increased automation, better visibility, et cetera. Number 5, is the platform integrated with and through critical systems? As much as I would like to say, for example, NinjaOne solves every problem that an IT team has, it probably doesn't, not for many teams, right? Every IT team will need multiple tools. And so you need to make sure that it ties into all the tools and other platforms that you care about. An example of this, NinjaOne integrates with all the leading ITSM platforms because those are the heart and mind of many IT organizations. We also integrate with EPP platforms because they are core to how security teams function. By integrating those things, we get better visibility, better automation, and reduce silos across organizations. And so integration across the enterprise tech stack is a critical component of evaluating your tech stack. And then finally here, it's how does the platform support and drive automation that reduce manual effort? I believe IDC put out some information showing that the number of IT ops professionals will decline year over year over the next 5 years. It's becoming really difficult to hire very skilled, hyper competent IT people, particularly in the IT ops realm. And you need to drive automation in order to stay ahead of that curve. And so if you have a platform approach, you have that unified data model, you can automate across workflows, you can automate across operating systems. That's super critical. So the next one here is what technology capabilities enable those outcomes. I do encourage you to download the Endpoint Management Buyer's Guide because there is a checklist in there that you can go through and it will help you do this evaluation. But there are a couple things worth highlighting here. First and foremost, cloud native scalability and multi-tenancy. You need to be cloud native, you need to be multi-tenant because this removes the infrastructure drag. You don't have to manage on-prem infrastructure. The total cost of ownership goes way down. Multi-tenancy is really important because as you have complexity in your organization, maybe you're pursuing an M&A strategy, maybe you have a multi-geo or a multi-location organization, you need multi-tenancy to take advantage of centralized support with localized hands-on, feet on the ground, boots on the ground. So looking at cloud native and multi-tenancy is really critical. The second here is that unification. The more devices and device types, the more unified visibility you get across all your devices, the better your outcomes will be. Fewer blind spots, better governance, better decisions, and just more efficiency around management. Number three here is that closed loop vulnerability management and patching. The most important thing you can do to secure your environment is proactively patch all of your devices. Being able to balance that against operational needs is really critical. But as your endpoint management platform evolves, you need to look at ones that support things like vulnerability scanning and management, integrate with your vulnerability scanning tools, and then leverage that for things like autonomous patching. Number four here, integrations. Again, you should always ask your vendors what tools you integrate with and consider how well they integrate with the tools that you care about most. This is going to be really critical for better data and better automation. Number five here is policy-based automation. You want a single tool to tell your platform how you want your devices managed. And so you need that policy-based approach to automation that will bring standardized control over your devices and better outcomes on how those devices are managed. And the last one here, I questioned whether to put it on here, but it's really critical. I've gone into a ton of IT organizations and seen them buy the best point solution to solve problem X. And that's a completely rational thing to do. But what we found was there was one person in the organization who could use it because it was so complex. You needed a PhD to use it. Platformization helps address this by having really just one tool, even if there are multiple solutions within the tool. By consolidating around a unified IT ops platform, you're able to reduce training, you're able to increase the accessibility of all the tools you use. Ultimately, what we see is through a platform approach and an approach that really prioritizes ease of use, you end up with more people using the solution to do things like automate and drive efficiency and get better outcomes. And so it's really critical in your evaluation to evaluate ease of use and adoptability in your technician set. What considerations do we need to think about when we're maximizing the value of our tech stack? The first is eliminating tool sprawl. To Tom's point, the CFO cares about hard cost reduction. One thing we found is our customers tend to replace 4 or more tools with NinjaOne when they implement them. That's really, really important from an ability to sell internally perspective. So look at what tools you can identify and consolidate into platforms. That's a really critical step one. Number two is the increase in operational efficiency. If you're automating more through a more unified approach to IT operations, you are going to be able to use your team more efficiently. You are maybe going to be able to hire people more effectively into the right roles. You're going to be able to reprioritize for strategic initiatives that drive business agility and outcomes. That's a really important outcome to sell this internally. And then last here is ultimately no CIO wants to be on the front of Times Magazine because it's usually for a breach, right? If that's the case, we really need to help you strengthen security and resilience. And ultimately, your IT ops platform needs to help you do that. Last but not least, not last but not least, I'd love to touch on really the benefits of NinjaOne here. So we regularly work with our customers and partners to understand the value that NinjaOne brings to their organization. And there are a couple things I want to highlight here. The first one here is, 71% of our customers replace 4 or more tools with NinjaOne. There are direct hard cost savings that come from that can help you sell internally. We see our users be 3 times more efficient than those who've switched from other tools, achieving as high as 900 to 1 tech to endpoint ratio. Including much higher. That's sort of the average across our customer base, ultimately resulting in a 40% reduction in IT costs associated with endpoint management. But it's not just the IT team who gets benefits, it's the workplace that gets benefits, right? We see a higher retention rate in IT staff when they use tools that they don't hate, including NinjaOne. And so that's a great outcome. And then finally, a substantial reduction in support costs because you're doing things like self-healing. You're identifying issues before they impact end users, remediating them, and you're never getting the ticket. You're seeing a much more efficient service management and service desk tech team because they're able to use tools to remediate faster. Ultimately, what we can do is help you build a case internally for a modern approach to endpoint management, taking data from our own customers in your own environment and helping you build a model to sell this internally to your customers. And you shouldn't just take our word on it. We were recently named a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Endpoint Management. We are up and to the right here. And really, the biggest thing to point out here is this is our first time in a Magic Quadrant, and we were a leader. And we were because we are able to deliver a truly unified approach to endpoint management and continue to innovate on the platform to bring new capabilities to you on a regular basis so that you can build a much more modern and unified approach to IT operations and endpoint management. So the last thing here is we are going to give away a free tech stack value assessment if you're interested. We are about to launch a poll. Andrew, if you can launch that, just let us know if you're interested and we will follow up with you. Ultimately, Tom's role here at Ninja is to really dig in and understand how Ninja brings value to customers. And he spent a lot of his time over the time he's been here at Ninja working in organizations to build that business case, and he can bring that to all of you and really evaluate your tech stack and how a modern approach to endpoint management can help. Anything you'd add to that, Tom?
Yeah, I think just the way I approach these things is to take a functional approach, right? Rather than a tools-based approach, more of a what are the functions that we're performing, what outcomes are we achieving with them, and frankly, what do business owners care about? And then kind of back into what are we actually paying? What's the cost of this to us, not just in dollars, but also in resource and opportunity costs, right? What are we not doing? Because some of our key resources are tied up doing stuff that that they're under pressure to do, right? That they maybe don't need to do. So yeah, I look forward to if somebody's whoever wins this, I look forward to working with you to kind of take this approach at looking at your enterprise and happy to do it.
So I know we're at time, and I'm sure a lot of people have to drop. We do have a couple minutes for questions if you have any. We do see the poll ongoing. We'll leave that up until we wrap up, but we'll give everyone a minute or two. If you have any questions, we'd love to answer them about Ninja, about modern endpoint management, about really anything that you'd like to know. If not, we'll wrap early because I know people are starting to leave because we're over time. Let me see if I see any questions here. Q&A. All right. I'm not seeing any come in, so I think we're going to wrap up. Tom, thanks so much for joining us today and walking through the more modern approach to endpoint management. Everyone who joined us, thank you so much for hopping on. Hopefully you got value out of it, and we look forward to working with you. Bye-bye.